By the way, this is the most Superman photo I've ever seen.
Isn't it? Yeah,
Solid
jawline.
picture.
Yeah. If this doesn't work out, you may have a backup plan.
Heck yeah.
I got a bum knee and been pretty banged up. The car business hasn't been good to mine. Well, I was talking to Bob Hollinshead, and he said, I go, you're 74, that's young. He goes, I'm really like 100 and something in car years.
That's 5 years in the business right there.
Right.
Any chance you wrestled in high school?
I did.
How'd I know? You've got the look of a wrestler.
I don't have the ears.
That's a compliment. You can actually just go roll around on the mats have someone knee you a few times and get some cauliflower ear.
Right. So you wrestled, obviously.
No. I did jiu-jitsu.
You know about cauliflower ear?
Time.
Oh, that's an offshoot.
Yeah, I did that for a long time ago. Very, very short period. I'd like to get back into it. Makes sense. But no, that's really the only sport I follow is MMA. You can ask me about football, baseball. I won't be able to tell you shit. But you ask me about UFC, MMA, I can probably fill you in.
I've just been watching college football anymore. But yeah, everything else has become too commercialized.
True that. Yep. Way to phrase that properly.
It was on the tip of my tongue. I tasted my words before I spit them out. That's the different wisdom and knowledge.
It's great. It's fantastic that we're all forced to censor ourselves now.
My mentor, who's the COO of AutoNation, used to always say, he goes, Kramer, you need to taste your words before you spit them out. I want you to chew on them and really think about how that's going to, what's on the tip of your tongue, taste it and see if everybody else will like that taste.
I don't care if they like that taste or not.
Right.
It tastes better to me than it tastes to them, damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it tasted better 5 minutes
I'm the only one tasting it, so who gives a shit?
Right. And then when you watch it back on the replay, you're like, doesn't taste the same.
It sounded better in my head for sure.
Right.
Yeah. That's happened many times. It's all right.
All right. 4, 3, 2. All right. Here we is.
Happy Friday.
About to make some words taste wonderful. So, Brian, congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Is this your
very
first
exciting time in the car business?
Is this your first time on the vendor side?
Yes, in 28 years.
It's fun, isn't it? It's a hell of a change.
It definitely is.
Well, it's definitely, well, I don't know how it is at Cars. I haven't worked there, but I would have to assume the IT department is a little better.
It definitely there's a lot more support. No, they're very warm and receptive, but it's interesting, when you're talking to the dealer body's been amazing as well. I was very worried that it was immediately I was going to get blacklisted, and it hasn't been like that. If anything else, it's been overwhelmingly positive from the dealer community, and I actually see like being able to connect the dots on like a bridge, because it's just like any situation like that. Let's go with the OEMs. I see where vendors are coming from now in a different way, and then I also see where dealers are coming from, and being able to be a Rosetta Stone to translate that to the people at Cars has been fantastic. And to tell some of my, dealer partners, hey, just so you know, this is what's happening on the other side. And I know you think it's just flicking a switch, but it's a little bit more than that. And being able to help, I guess, communicate that like Bluetooth or something has been really cool.
What would you say is so far? And when was your first day?
Monday.
Oh, okay. So maybe this question, we'll have to ask this question again, but so far, what's been the biggest epiphany, realization, surprise, however you want to call it?
I wouldn't, I would say maybe a little bit the perception. I think that both sides give the other side, more credit than maybe we need to. And they're, like for instance, we're launching some products and we assume that dealers are going to see this and say that makes sense and then do it. And having, right. And having just come out of that space, obviously there's a lot of positions in a dealership that get paid a significant amount of money to make sure that things happen in a certain way. Because if not, I mean, there's many dealerships that execute and there's many that, as you know, that don't. And the execution side, I think that's really where I can help add value at cars. The technology is amazing, but I think that the roadblocks, and it's not even just with cars, it's, across the spectrum in a lot of dealerships, there's a lot of reasons why things don't happen. So I always, when I was on the retail side, leveraged the technology to weave it into the fabric, so it becomes one. It's not like here's the technology, here's the people part. I really think that it should be, one singular piece, that the technology complements the talent, and the talent complements the tech, and the tech can be used as an accountability measure. And I'll give you an example. When we were launching digital retail at the Germain Toyota store, I used to get really frustrated because the finance department would get a deal and then they're manually entering all this stuff. And I said, but the customer typed all this stuff in online and they filled out their credit application. They did all these things. And now they come in for this express delivery. And then we weren't prepared for it. So then the finance manager would say, what do you want me to do? This is what I got. And then you try to figure out all the different things. And there was no malicious intent from anyone. Our settings in the system weren't making it so that you had to have 2 years of job history and 2 years of residence. Something real simple, and then a filter, and if this, then that if you had less than a 620 beacon or 619, that you had a 2 to 4 references depending on the score. You go to a 579 or below, you need 4 references. So just making those things mandatory. Once we sat down, stopped sawing for a minute and sharpened the blade, and we just set those defaults, we never had the problem again. And I think that it's, if you give everybody an option to not do something, they're obviously going to want to go as fast as possible. And we just need to make sure and also not make sure to have people do things that they don't need to be doing as well. Because that's also, we're just as guilty of that in the retail side, is having a bunch of forms and a deal checklist that go on a road to nowhere. And it's just a bunch of minutia from stuff we used to do 10 years ago. We don't purge the non-essential things and just hammer on the essential things. And I think that's where technology is going to help propel this industry, for the next 10 years.
You just helped me realize something. I guess it's been a little over 10 years ago since I transitioned from the dealer side to the vendor side. And I realized just now that the technologists seem to have shifted in the mindsets. So 10 years ago, it was more of let's just build it and they'll come. So we throw it out there and no worries, dealers will start using it just as we intended it to. And today, I feel like the engineers that I'm speaking to at multiple companies are now more thoughtful about the workflows and how the dealers will interact with it than let's just build this feature and throw it out there and put it together. So there is that.
No, I think that there has to be, when we were going through digital transformation at the dealership level at Germain, I had a lucid chart, and we had the tech stack. As one, let's say you have a vertical workflow, right? You've got the tech stack as part of it. Where does it go and where's the people aspect of it? Then where's the process aspect of it? And then in another column, we had what's the training at each one of those points, right? And how do we because to just have the tech without the training or without the right people, and then trying to eliminate redundant tasks like just data entry, multiple data entry. How many times do we enter a VIN number? How many times do we enter a odometer, trade odometer, multiple times? Anytime there's some kind of, manual entry, there's human chance for error, right? So the more automation and that sort of thing, we can make people go faster. And in essence, by putting more technology into the process, embedding it into the process, you're actually freeing up your associates to be able to delight customers more. Because everybody says, well, everybody gets so caught up in replying to emails and they're so in their devices and all that stuff. It's because of the overtasking that we do that AI could take over for. And everybody's afraid of getting replaced by robots and, Terminator 2, Skynet taking over and all these fears. But there's not enough labor, not enough people to fill the jobs that are going to be needed anyway. So you're going to need that technology. But once we get past all that, I mean, ideally, all those workflows and everything, if you put enough thought into it and strategy, they just work so that you can be there when the customer needs you instead of back there typing this and pushing this API and then fixing this because the API push didn't work correctly and all these other bricks and we didn't train them correctly as to what to do when at that step. And then we get frustrated with our associates. Like, how could you do that? Why would you do that way? Like we're vilifying them because they're trying to take down the whole dealership. But, a lot of it just all comes down to clarity and constantly, one of the mistakes that I made early on during COVID is I wanted to go so fast. So I just hit the accelerator, max and didn't communicate with everybody, everything that I was doing or what it was going to look like at the end. So there were some points where they were really questioning. They're like, man, he's lost his mind. He must, COVID thing has got him off the rails. And I wasn't, it was just, I said, I was going to focus on the next week. We don't need to be focused on the end result, but I also didn't have a halo that they could see there was a light at the end of the tunnel. They just saw that I changed this. And then, a month later, we were blowing that up. Now we're going to use this software because we're going to eliminate 3 more steps. And it was happening so fast, they couldn't keep up with it. So I think that there's a dichotomy or a bell curve to make sure that as a leader that we're communicating to everybody where we're going and making sure everybody's keeping up.
Well, that is an excellent lesson to take to cars. You're going to find that's more important than ever, especially working with the engineers. So speaking of that, how'd you do it? Why'd you do it?
Oh, going to cars?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll tell you, I love the dealership world. I love the adrenaline. I love, I miss the Saturday meetings. I miss my team and the camaraderie that goes along with it. But I've got 2 young daughters. One's 11, one's 15, and attending all their volleyball games and tournaments and all that stuff wasn't part of that recipe. So that was something that, was a real sobering moment. My oldest daughter's driving now. I've only got 3 years left and she's gone. So that was the primary driver and, spending some time. Right. And at a moment, what's, you can always make more money. You can't get more time.
Nope.
So it's one of the toughest decisions that I've ever made, especially when, that store was performing at a really high level. But
you'll have no regrets.
I appreciate that, Jeff. I agree. I can't, my daughters and I'm not going to be able, I would have regrets if I didn't do it.
Exactly.
But talking to Bob, talking to Alex, it's also a unique time to change the industry. And I think we're at a tipping point, with digital retail and online retailing and all those things, they've got all the entities. Alex obviously is a phenomenal leader. Bob Hollinshead's a true genius, and his technology, embedded into that tech stack with, cars, DI or Dealer Inspire, the CRM, the website, the digital retail tool, the Credit IQ software that they, are just now integrating, which will be able to pull your payoff. So at 2 a.m., if you're transacting on a vehicle, you'll be able to not just look to see what the payments would be, but you'll be able to get pre-approved. You'll be able to appraise your vehicle with a real number that they'll transact at, so that all of our consumers don't have to go to Carvana or another third-party website. They can stay within the dealer ecosystem, and we take care of them better than they would if they were, dealing with another entity. And they'll be able to pull their payoff, right there on the spot. And come pretty close to transacting to give the dealer back their data and the client at the same time. And I think I think that at the end of the day, that's what the OEMs are kind of shaking up and pushing back on, is because that's what they want. And I don't know, from being on the dealer side most recently, that most dealers know how to connect the dot. I had Jared Kilway at the Germain store that taught me how to connect all this stuff. I never would have known how to do it. And I think that we can help a ton of dealers out. And I think it's a tipping point in our industry. And if we don't get in front of this, I love this industry, and I'll never leave it. And I don't want to see something bad happen like in electronics and other industries that I was in, when I was younger. It's a special industry. And I think that we got a unique situation at Cars to change the way we do business forever. And I think we can do it more profitably by doing it that way. We just need to go out in front and show everybody, what we're thinking and how to do it. And by taking a few risks, that it's going to be okay. And by being more aggressive, that we're going to grab market share and make the industry better for everybody coming behind us.
Definitely a lot of risk involved. I'm sure you'd all agree that COVID sort of really amplified and pushed, dealers to get into more digital retail space, come up with different technologies and how to utilize them properly. Had that never happened, always, just an off the wall question, but I always got to wonder, like, how quick would have dealers adapted? Did this push us up 10 years, 5 years, 20 years? Probably not 20 years.
I think it pushes up 10.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah,
we completed
something I'll have to think about.
A completely digital transaction, and I think it was in Automotive News the first week of March of 2020. It was maybe like 10 days before, 2 weeks before COVID hit. And we were getting a lot of grief because everybody said, what do you spend all that time doing all that for? Something's going to happen 5% of the time. What's the point? And, Brian Benstock talks about return on investment versus return on learning. And what we learned through that is how we were able to transact in the metaverse. We decided we were going to do it. 60 days later, we do that transaction. Mm-hmm. What the more important lesson is COVID hit. And this tipping point is going to happen again in our industry, be whatever disruption it's going to be. If it's a pandemic, if it's the inventory, microchips finally catching up, and then the, overproduction of vehicles, or whatever it doesn't matter what the disruption is. We were prepared at that moment. We had been training, almost painfully for the team on our culture, how we operate, going frictionless, going digital, because the technology connected is a piece of it, but the training that goes around it and how to make it all work is just as big. So when COVID hit, everybody was freaking out. I know a lot of my friends were, shutting down their stores for the month of April. We were working every other week and, turning down inventory. And I made the crazy plea to Mr. Germain. I said, I'm going to take all the inventory and some surplus that some other dealers turned down. And I want to increase the advertising. Most people had gone dark and
cut back. Yeah.
My operations director called up and said, you've lost your mind. What are you talking about? Advertising more. But that's when we stopped advertising price. And my marketing agency cut an ad real quick, turned it around in maybe 5 days. Everybody was just going back then, right, as you remember. And next thing you know, we had this thing, we'll come to you. So, it was like a pizza. Somebody was ordering the pizza on their phone in the commercial, and then a car. And she said, you're ordering a pizza. I ordered a car. Oh, and here it is. And that spot we were able to get 6 times the rotation for the same amount of money, because there wasn't, everybody was pulling back. So the more resilient that you are with connecting the dots and all this stuff to becoming fortified, resilient, galvanized with technology, building a brick house when everybody else is living in a straw house, whatever analogy you want to use. When the disruption comes again, for a second there, it was like we got sucker punched, but then we all sat in a room and I said, we need to put all our chips in. We need to go, we're built for this. We're ready for this. Our technology, we've got a competitive advantage while everybody else is trying to get caught up. We're already there. Now we can just pour gasoline on that fire. And that's what we're going to try to help dealers do over the next few years.
So as you rolled that out, how did you overcome the whole trade-in evaluation piece? Because obviously that's always been the tricky piece when it comes down to digital retailing, is how do you get the number on the trade? How do you, integrate that in? How did you go about that?
So ironically, that's when we started becoming a heavy user of Accu-Trade. And we
this
didn't have
is a leading question.
Right. But so we didn't have, it started in the showroom. Actually, before that, it started. So I said to the team, I said, it was driving me insane, the inconsistencies of all the different processes that we had, depending on if I asked the new car building, the used car building, how are we handling sight unseen appraisals? How are we handling virtual appraisals? If somebody calls on a phone up, how are we handling that? And you guys know what the answer always is, hey, that's a great question. I know that I'm in Naples and you're in Tallahassee, or you're in Mississippi, and you're calling about this one exclusive 20,000 mile Toyota Solera. But, it depends on the condition, the equipment. When's a good time for you to come in, right now or a little bit later? Well, I live in Mississippi. Well, it's not that far. Well, MapQuest, Google Maps, it's a 14-hour drive.
If you buy the car, we'll refund your hotel room.
Right. And we're laughing about it because that's still happening all over the place. And versus just texting them the link, hey, here's this link if you want to fill it out. Just like, and it came down to Carvana snapping a couple cars out of our showroom, while transactions were happening. And I had to sit there and, really, it happens once, that's one thing. But when it starts happening repetitively, because we're not giving the answers quick enough or transparent enough, or worst case, worse than that is when they show up and they just don't have a trade. I'm like, we're selling all these cars. Sometimes we're having a 50, 60 car weekend and we take in like 20, 25 trades. I'm like, where are all these cars going? Oh, they must be snowbirds or all the other biases that you jump to in those situations. And it's not what it was. They were selling to other people that gave them an exact number, not a range, a number they would transact at. And then we found out that they didn't shop us a lot. That was the fear, is, they're just going to take that. Just like back in the day, we didn't, want to give somebody a price unless they were committed to buy. And that forced them to shop. The same thing happens with the trades. And it took me a long time to realize that. And, just by texting them that, the customers we also found were extremely honest. When you trust clients, the reason they don't trust us is because we don't trust them first. And that's a very important step. We were all like, well, they're going to lie. They're going to do this and do that.
Isn't that one of the first things we're trained? All buyers are liars.
It was the first thing I was trained during my onboarding. And said, don't ever forget.
I still believe it personally, but
I now have the data to show that it isn't. Now we use the OBD tool, and 5 people a week on average were clearing their codes, and they were, which I didn't see that happening based on how accurate they were. But when the messaging went out, we're going to inspect, and here's what you can expect. And we will scan it, and we will do this, and we're going to take pictures, or we would have the client upload pictures remotely. It was very, very rare that they weren't on it. And if they weren't, it wasn't because it was malicious. It's because they just didn't know. They didn't know what the trim was, or they didn't know, they weren't a car person, right? So we would get always vilifying them. They're trying to steal from us again. Liars, buyers are liars. But the interesting thing is, I listen to the Carvana shareholder calls. They look at total loss aggregate ratio of 7 to 8% of how many cars they're going to lose money on appraisals, inventory. We fixate on a line item. No car can lose money. We don't look at the whole body of work. We look at total bucket of gross, but we don't look at total bucket of wholesale profit or total bucket of wholesale loss, or retail loss for that matter, and know that we're going, just like with policy, you're going to have 1.5% on average policy adjustments if you're doing everything right. And if it goes up, then you got an issue. And if it's, too low, then you're probably being conservative, or you're, not taking care of customers. But the same way goes for that other metric, but we don't, or we get risk averse and we don't step up on trade. So then we don't have to worry about that, because then they go to another, retailer, they vacuum up all of our trades, and we can at least say that we had a 60% look to book. We're not missing any trades. and all the other things, the fallacies that we think about, versus just making it simple, taking care of the customer, taking in the trades, and empowering our staff to also put all the information in correctly. Right after COVID, we didn't have enough appraisers. So I came up with another, off the wall answer. I said, let's just let the salespeople appraise the cars. Mm-hmm. And everybody's like, well, now you lost your mind. And I said, we make mistakes. What's the worst that could happen? Oh, a lot could happen. Well, but if we put in the bumpers as to they're going to do this and this and this, and they're still doing it today, and they do a phenomenal job.
That's great.
The customers do a phenomenal job too appraising cars, just like they do with Carvana and CarMax. CarMax, they acquired. I was just at a meeting in Vegas, and Bill Nash said that they went from 300,000 cars acquired 2 years ago to 750,000 last year because they turned on their virtual appraisal lane.
It's funny how people will always do a phenomenal job when they know they're going to be held accountable. Crazy how that
works. And you have measurements and you have KPIs that are accurate.
Yeah. Brian, listening to you speak, give me another epiphany here. It's like we were just talking about maybe being leapfrogged 10 years ahead because of responses to COVID. And one of the things I think has actually happened here is the car business has always been about availability of cars to sell, pricing. And if you think about all right, so the internet made pricing a priority. And then, you've got marketing, making sure that people know you've got that car and the price is such. And now what it's changing into, or the emphasis is now on ease. How easy can you make it for the consumer? The funny part is all four of those things have always been there. It's just Agreed. That one of those things seems to get emphasized more because of market conditions or a change in technology or something along those lines. But if you're a dealer, such as what you were talking about earlier, you guys were already trying to make it easier for the consumer, for example. So when the market condition occurred, you were right there ready for it. So if you're a dealer and you're thinking about, man, it's always going to be about availability. It's always going to be about price. It's always going to be about letting the customer know this thing exists at this price, and they want it as easy as they can get it. If you're always practicing those things, you'll be prepared for anything.
And if you're always enabling your salespeople, I've had salespeople that have come up to me saying that they were getting recruited by competitors, and then they were, we had a high level of trust at that store, and I would ask them, because just like a mystery shop, everybody's like, why do you want to know those things, or why do you want to know how Tesla's selling a car, and why do you want to know what they're, the customer we already lost that deal. Why do you have to go back through and exhume the body and perform another autopsy? And that's the bulk of what I did. Drove, a lot of people on my team crazy. But when I asked them about the onboarding or the interview process and what it looked like, they never even really got to money, because when they said, okay, so can I appraise my own vehicles? Because, they all had iPads. Well, no, we don't. We're not going to let you do that, but we're going to pay you. You'll make more money. That didn't do anything for them. They wanted empowerment. They wanted to be able to, be trusted. They wanted people to. They just wanted to be empowered, enabled, and trusted.
Yeah,
and that's the differentiator.
Have some faith.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you were mentioning was it Alex and Bob earlier? So obviously Alex is Alex Vetter, the Cars.com side. But can you give us a little rundown on who Bob is?
So Bob Hollinshead is the creator of Accu-Trade. He has wholesaled more cars than anybody else on planet Earth.
I've heard he'll do like 100 in a day.
He averaged about 600 or 700 a day.
Oh,
but there's been days where he's done like 3,000. And he keep, just under $100 million of cars in inventory. And I don't think he has any floor plan. Pretty sure he doesn't. But he's got 2 lanes at Mannheim up in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. But he's he was the one that was originally buying these cars sight unseen. And I think he was, with a lot of the virtual online retailers, he was either powering them or indirectly involved. But he's the creator of Auto Trader Trade and Marketplace, the first guaranteed cash offer.
Yeah, I always like to bring that up because when it was first announced, I'm like, he was the one behind the trade-in marketplace, and that was a big proponent of that whenever it first came out. Yeah,
And a lot of people pushed back then.
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I was in charge of getting it implemented within the dealerships, and it was difficult, to say the least. Very difficult. Just yet it was so easy. It was so freaking easy to use. Heck, I even used it myself to sell one of my cars to them. It was so easy. I just couldn't understand why dealerships struggled. Why did they fight back against this so much? Because to me, it just made all the sense in the world. And maybe maybe trade-in marketplace was just sort of before its time. And obviously now we've got the right weather for it to really make sense. And with dealerships trying to source more used cars for the dealership, I mean, you put dealerships in an area where they're going to struggle. Typically they're going to find a way to get out of it. So it was great to see that reintroduced back into the market, and freaking great timing. So you were also back to sort of my original question was, how did you get, what were some of the steps to get the Accu-Trade piece at the dealership? What were some of the obstacles that you had to overcome, when it came to management and saying, because like you said, you sat in there and they told you were crazy, maybe not verbatim. How were you able to overcome some of those obstacles?
Well, I had really talented, really smart managers that, no different. I was skeptical of it at first, but once you have data, some people will argue data. Fortunately, the people I was with wouldn't. Okay, so it's making me look at things differently. And we sat through, and first we were talking about speed, and I said, look, we're so inconsistent. If just like with every dealership that any of us have ever worked in, if you ask 3 different appraisers or 5 different appraisers, managers in the store, what's a car worth? And that spread, it's the oldest joke at NADA, is going to be a $3,000 to $5,000 swing, right? Mm-hmm. So just having the consistency of doing that, but then you run into the problem, all of us in the car business, we got a pretty big ego, right? Especially the managers. And we all think that we know more than the person sitting next to us. And we think we know more what a car is worth more than somebody else. So we also had to be okay failing and making some mistakes. And I will say that to go through all these journeys and these experiments, there was a lot of $3,000, $5,000, $7,000 mistakes, like a lot, to get to these conclusions. And a lot of times what will happen is somebody will get 1 or 2 of those and then the party's over, right? That we're done with that experiment. We're going to go right back to the safe way, and we're not going to take any more chances. And that's what was happening. Everybody kept trying to happen. Luckily, we were profitable on the other 96% of them. And I, said, instead of focusing on the 4%, let's just take a look at this. And luckily I had Wendell Hardy, who's not the GM of that store, who had my back. So at least we had a unified front. I had the support from the Germains, which is critical. Not everybody has the support from the dealer, because the dealer sees a big loss like that, freaks out. Mm-hmm. So I think it was kind of the perfect storm. And, Bob Holland said, called up and, got with us and said, I'd see you're using this tool in a certain way. So he was trying to understand how it worked and how we did certain things. And then he would ask us a lot of questions. So when you do this, why do you do that? And one of the things that we, came to the epiphany of is that we weren't the best end user for every used car, which I argued with him ad nauseum about that. And he said, if you're the best end user for every car, why don't you go buy every car at the auction? And why don't you just leave your hand up? CarMax does it, right? But not on every single car, because they know what they're the best end user, which is why their wholesale is up 95% year over year. Now you would think they buy everything. They retail everything, but they also realize that they're not the best end user for every single vehicle.
And Bob's behind Accu-Trade too, right?
Yeah, he sold 2 cars, and then he was also behind KBB Instant Cash Offer.
That's right.
And sold that to Cox. Chip Perry, architected that deal.
Mm-hmm.
fun working from home, isn't it?
It is. It
is. Someone's making a bagel.
So, so before we went on, I had a call with Joe Pastel, who's a coworker of yours now. I don't know if you've fully met Joe yet.
Oh yeah,
shout
we
out
were on
to Uncle
Clubhouse
Joe
this morning.
Very good. So, we were talking a bit about Accu-Trade, and he was telling me about the success of it prior to Cars buying it, and how they grew organically, all word of mouth, a single salesperson. And I was wondering, when did he actually bring that to market? Do you know?
And which one? The trading marketplace?
No, Accu-Trade.
Oh, Accu-Trade. First, he launched it. Well, he was using it as his own console to dominate the used car business, the wholesale side. So he spent a significant amount, like an 8-digit amount of money to build it with Jeff Zamora, who's our CTO for that now. But they built that entire infrastructure, and basically, like in the movie Ready Player One, how they had a competitive advantage. With more technology, he had like the ultimate gaming console for wholesale activity. So he built it originally to give himself an unfair competitive advantage. And then he licensed it to TrueCar to be able to use it for. So it's like the third evolution of Trade-in Marketplace.
Okay.
Trade-in Marketplace is version 1.0, version 2.0, KBB Instant Cash Offer. Version 3.0 is Accu-Trade. And he was using it with TrueCar initially, and then ended up selling the whole thing to Cars. But that was 17, I think.
Okay.
He had it for a couple of years before that for himself.
Gotcha.
What type of strain do you think this will put in the future here on, what's the future of the live auctions, the physical live auctions going to the auction? Do you think, obviously this is going to have some type of, pick away at that business. I'm just curious to what you think,
Hopefully
what's the percentage or what's that? Yeah. Well, I was going to bring that up as well. Yeah.
Okay. So, that's obviously further down the line, but there's a couple of things. When you go to an auction, obviously all the cars don't have an OBD tool scanning all of them, right? Some of them do, some of them don't. And then the number one friction point when I ask dealers what they don't like about that process is the CRs or the condition reports. One has this level of accuracy, one has this level. There's not a lot of trust. So, people don't always get as aggressive as they should be because of their fear of accuracy on the condition reports from auction to auction and online auction to, so now you've got a lot of third parties that are getting inspectors, but there's a cost with that. And more importantly, there's a time suck that goes along with having inspectors all over the country. So in every single day that a car is not transacting, obviously it's an exponential thing when you're talking about 43 million cars across the country. So in a perfect world, which at some point it will be, everybody's appraising their cars through Accu-Trade, getting this accurate number. The used car manager doesn't have to argue with the new car manager. The new car manager doesn't say used car manager is stealing all their trades. And the used car manager doesn't have to say that they're burying them in all their trades. And they don't have to call the GSM or the GM on every single appraisal. Hey, can you take another look at this? Hey, can you, they don't have to spend 3 or 4 hours a day, trying to keep everybody happy and getting everybody in an office, trying to get them to not kill each other. Or say, I don't care. We're just putting that much money in the car, instead of looking at the data and realize, and then all of a sudden, 45 days later, hey, how come we haven't sold that car? Well, that's because of such and such buried us in it, took his side, and we got victimized. So once you remove all that time suck and all that other stuff, appraisal comes in either online or however, it gets scanned, then it gets the app. They put all the options and equipment in. As you're doing that, you're building a condition report, just like an inspector would, right? If it's done correctly. So you're taking the photos, you're taking a tread depth scan tool, or you have an API into a tread depth scanner on the service drive. So that when they drive over, it's already, a connected car or whatever. But all of that goes into one centralized condition report. And now you have a CR that the whole point of an auction is to be able to physically touch it, feel it, smell it, get the best end user. But if you can dump all of those cars into one centralized marketplace, and you don't need an inspector because there's a like a GIA diamond rating system where I trust you, you trust me. Just like an appraiser in a house or whatever. People are buying houses sight unseen right now on Zillow, like a lot of them in Florida. They've never even been to the house. They don't know anything about it. And yeah, in Texas, it's happening all the time. So it's just a matter of finding an efficient market to where there's a certain level of trust. And what needs to happen is there needs to be a universal condition report, which Bob has developed, and it'll be coming out, probably some point next year, to where there's a single source of truth on every single vehicle. And if you think, philosophically, like a blockchain or something where, like a smart contract or an e-contract in the dealership, the bank trusts that if this is accurate, and they've got some system on the back that verifies, whatever. If everybody appraises cars the same way consistently, then you could have minimal auction fees, lower transport costs. You just, obviously volume solves everything. And I could go on, and I'm sure you're seeing the writing on the walls as to where this is going. But
I actually
you don't need all that brick and mortar infrastructure.
Yeah. I didn't think about it like that. Yeah, if keeping it regulated.
So would there be a value associated to like a blemish on the vehicle? So, stained headliner, for example, or ripped seat.
So there is now in the tool. So as of right now, when you scan, and like I said, we have done 40. Well, they're probably almost up to 50,000 now at that Toyota store. But when they scan a OBD2 tool, it automatically syncs up with that appraisal when they scan that VIN. And it's connected via Bluetooth, and it's automatically populating it. But for the sake of speed, let's say that it has, a hard shift in the transmission. So there's some sort of transmission error, in it, but it knows what the op code is, or what the fault code is, or it has not a recall. It has a known issue. Let's say cylinder 3 is a misfire and whatever. It knows exactly what that is, what's the labor and what's the parts. And what it uses is OEM, it uses $100 an hour for a labor rate, which could be plus or minus. And I know everybody can argue about what that number should be, but at least it's consistent. And then OEM parts less 20%. So if they want to go aftermarket parts, it's obviously going to be less, or they can add 20% if they want to get to whatever it's going to be, according to Repair Pal or whatever. But that's what's populating that data. Then it trickles down into the appraisals, so that if you have a newer used car manager that doesn't have years and years of experience and doesn't know that on these cars this is characteristic, which is all indicated in the appraisal, common items that are arbed at an auction. But if somebody wants to know, check engine light, for instance, some people deduct $2,000. Some people deduct $500. So it's probably, because everybody says it's just a gas cap, right? When it's not always a gas cap. So either they get too conservative or they get too aggressive. Either way, they're wrong. Versus just knowing what it is. So if it's we had it on a Corvette recently where it didn't have the catalytic converter. Typically what happens is now it makes it to the auction.
That's a value add on a vet, right?
Right. So now it goes through the shop. Hey, this thing doesn't have this. You guys didn't look underneath the car. And then everybody starts pointing fingers at each other. Why didn't you see that? You should have saw that.
You couldn't hear it?
Somebody smelled it.
Right. Let's take it to the auction and see if they notice. And that's typically what happens, versus saying to the client, because the client probably knew. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't know. But either way, that it would show up right then and there. So it removes all doubt. And that's one of the reasons why CarMax can step up on cars. Everybody says, well, how are they putting all this stupid money into cars? Well, they scan them all. They know. It's a calculated risk. And they don't make the mistakes that a lot of us make. Their margin of their variance of error is very, very tight, which allows them to be more aggressive on the right cars. And those cars that they're more aggressive on generate more PVR. They know what they're doing. They're not just randomly, playing craps out at the auction. or at the curb. I mean, they're very data driven with how they do it, and quantifying those and having, one thing is the trade value, the ACVs, right? Which everybody, and that's typically what I hook up on when we get into these conversations, is all about the ACVs. But the real juice in the future is going to be the recon. What should the recon be? What are we deducted for? Because that's where dealers get way overzealous and overestimate worst case scenarios instead of realistic scenarios. And this tool will be able to narrow that gap down to a reasonable number, to where it's not perfect, but it's going to tighten up that margin of error to be able to allow us to acquire a lot more cars and not be running scared, is where we can just play offense down the field instead of playing defense.
So you mentioned CarMax and they're buying, while somebody's down, let's kick them while they're down. What about Carvana? Are they doing any?
I think that they're regrouping. I have learned my lesson by dismissing and scoffing at CarMax back in the day. I'm like, well, what are they going to do? Right? They're going to keep on they're putting all this stupid money in cars. At some point, it's a Ponzi scheme. I said all the same stuff about CarMax. You can't. But they're okay. We're going to hire somebody for $5 an hour, and then you're not going to make any money on service. So that all the different biases that I could justify allowed me, when I was literally at the same intersection in Ohio as another CarMax that kept selling more and more cars, and they weren't sourcing from customers. They just stand at the lane and pay way more than we would, thousands more. I wholesaled a bunch of cars to them through the auction, and they bought them all, and they obviously made money on it, and they now sell more cars. Actually, Carvana, last time I saw, sells more cars in that town than anybody else, than CarMax, and there's some great used car operators in that town, but they've obviously figured something out with a data standpoint. But I think that Carvana, although they've been bloodied and knocked around, and I don't agree with how they managed their debt situation and some of the terms that they agreed to. I don't know that they had a choice, but I also think that when everybody, there's no justification for how they laid off all those people. But if they acquire ADESA and they already had this entity, I'm sure there's 2,500 jobs at duplication that overlap, right? And however they made that decision, but it was probably inevitable, with or without the share value doing what it did. But they have
their CEO cashing out when it was at the height and just buying $40 million worth of shares all of a sudden.
Right. Or they had some definite questionable repurchase programs that they did. But the one thing that has been consistent throughout the whole thing is their operational acumen. They still generate a decent amount per vehicle. And I think that it's very important to distinguish between their debt, they're building those towers and all the infrastructure that expense. And everybody says they're bleeding money and they're losing money. If they didn't take on all these projects and all this R&D, if you look at just their core business, it's profitable. And it's just not elastic. Their recon centers, which they just fixed with ADESA, and I'm sure there's an insane amount of infrastructure overhaul that they're going through. But everybody needs to watch out when they emerge from that, because they're going to come out stronger and with a lot more data that a lot of they've been acquiring from a lot of our customers. Because any of our customers that get on their website to appraise their vehicle, they now have that client's data. So what are they going to do with that in 3 years? That's the question we need to be asking.
That's a great question to ask. I remember we had so little confidence in CarMax back in the day. A customer would come in and we would put a number on it, or we didn't want to put a number on it. We would just send the customer CarMax. Hey, take it down here to CarMax and get a number on it, then bring it back to us. And I'm thinking, why the hell would we do that? Stupid. It still happens, man.
I've seen it personally.
There was an interesting theory, just to take this back to Carvana for a quick second. We were making some jokes about them the other day, and there's this great little meme rolling around where it's a picture of a Carvana store and there's a Spirit Halloween sign that says coming soon.
I've seen that one.
That's hilarious. But I sent it to one of a dealer buddy, and he wrote back and said, "That's funny. However, I could see where they've got this infrastructure all in place to help some of these new manufacturers who are trying to get into the United States, or even some of the EV suppliers, get a
True.
quick physical win into some marketplaces."
Well, they're going to need some way to get rid of those vehicles. I know, Tesla didn't have a way to move their trades for, some time until they figured that out. All those new EV companies are going to need to partner with somebody. Maybe somebody has an auction, with an infrastructure all across the country. But my biggest fear is the data play. You see what happened to Toys R Us when they partnered up with, Amazon, and the next thing you know, they have a working model as to what people are searching for, what toys in what part of the country, what are those buyers, how do we retarget them, and obviously they can do it better than anybody. Well, Carvana is very, very good at doing that, and through credit unions and many other programs, we've been sending them our customers' data, which the last couple of years might not have been the biggest deal, but it's going to be. I mean, we all know what's going on with data, Graham-Leach Bliley, and all that sort of thing. They got ahead of that, and now they have how many customers in the United States have appraised their cars on Carvana's website?
Well, probably quite a few. I
don't know, but it's got to be a staggering number. Probably a majority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So why not plug in your own tool, implement that, and keep that data in house?
Correct, and make it a seamless experience.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I wasn't aware of when you're back to the Accu-Trade piece was, and correct me if I'm wrong, so whenever you're doing a condition report, they're actually able to, so like if it was a tear or a rip or stain, they could actually look up that piece almost real time, apply the $100 charge for, for the service charge itself, and put all that together. And you're saying that's pretty accurate.
Now, cosmetics are still
a little
there's
iffy.
A default.
Okay.
But yeah, they need to get a little bit tighter. There was a project once with Dent was trying to figure out what's the dollar amount to try to standardize that as well, because that's something else that hasn't been standardized in the industry. But from a mechanical standpoint, anything since 2012 or newer that has a labor op, that's all in their parts and labor.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. That's cool.
It is very cool.
Used correctly. Now, the issue is not everybody scans 100% of the appraisals or scans them once the client does come in to trade it in. Okay. Or salesperson goes out to do it, scanning it at that moment to verify it is what we said it was going to be. It's obviously a critical piece of it.
When the consumer is doing it from the house, obviously they're not going to have the technology or the OBD tool.
Upload at cars.com.
What's that?
Upload at cars.com. All the stuff that's needed, right?
So you can upload the photos and all that sort of thing. Now we're going to see on our side the common problems that happen on cars of that year and age, but the bulk of the cars that we're seeing right now are still under warranty on the sight unseens. So if a customer if they have an older vehicle, a lot of times they were coming into the dealership to see what was going on and look at the cars, or they started off on used and then we moved them over to new. Mm-hmm. The ones that I'm talking about on a sight unseen, the majority of them, we're calling customers that they're coming in for service tomorrow. We're calling them because their service appointment's in 2 or 3 days, or their service appointment was just yesterday or the day before, or their lease is up in 6 months and they say, look, I already know what it's like. Just tell me what the numbers are. And I'm not driving all the way over there. And those are the cars, as you guys know, that we would always say, I know it's the same car and you've had 4 in a row and it's identical to all 4 of those because it hasn't had a major body style change, but I still need you to come in here because your presence is your leverage, and that's when you're going to get the best deal. And all these other things that go along with that, versus just allowing the client to transact. So then we force them to bounce off, go to another third-party site, they go right back into cars.com anyway, and then go right through the chute. The problem is that when they get to the trade appraisal, typically they would stop, and we get a lead, and then we follow up on it. And the client, hey, I noticed you did this and this. How can I help? Well, I got all the information I need about the new car, but I wanted to see what my trade was worth. Can you give me an idea what that is over the phone? Oh yeah, absolutely. I can totally. It depends on condition, color, options, equipment. When's a good time for you to come in? Right now or a little bit later?
Your presence is your leverage.
Right.
That's my
that way
favorite.
They know you're serious.
Actually, just recently was trying to potentially look at trading a car in, and I completely left the market because I got tired of that answer.
Oh, really?
And then I'll keep driving the car. F it. I just want ease.
And Alex, that's true. I've had a lot of customers tell me that. They said it's just, I did that on a generator recently. I mean, I went through a generator, and it's like the same thing, but I wanted to get a generator. And I got online and filled it out with 3 different providers. Then all of a sudden I started getting retargeted on their social media campaigns. They're spending obviously a lot of money on that. And I said, look, I just wanted to get a range. Is it $5,000, $10,000, $15,000? I just need an idea of what it's worth. It's more complicated than that. I said, well, I give my square foot. What information do you need? I don't have time to sit around for 2 hours with you. I just don't. I'll buy it and I'm ready to transact. No, it's so complicated. So I ended up just getting on Google, and I said, what kind of model? So I just get on Google and hit the shopping button instead of the all button, because that's where all the search terms were. I get on shopping, and all of a sudden it's this model, this model, this model. And I said, well, how much is this? I got the model number. Oh, okay. So you've been looking for a while. No. So, so I offline him. I went in there, put all my information in, and what did it do? It submitted a lead to the same guy, the third party. So that company's putting all that marketing money into marketing that, just to send it to that guy that says he can't give me any information. And that's what we do in the car business.
Yeah, we do.
This is why people are choosing Carvanas and Vrooms.
Which is what we're going to change.
I definitely see that. Yeah, because it doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense. It hasn't made sense for years. Dealerships are more than capable of offering all the benefits of any of those disruptors. Mm-hmm. Make it way more efficient, much easier, and just an overall better experience. There's not one dealership out there that can't provide that type of service. It's just a decision on whether or not you want to.
And I don't know that they've really been equipped. We weren't equipped before Accu-Trade to be able to do that in an easy way.
No, but you could still give a customer a number, and it could still be the exact number. I mean, if the customer comes in and the car is any different than what they explain, then we're starting over.
Right. Or then we ask them to put all the information back in. I mean, typically what I see is that everybody wants to give a range. They go, that way we give hope for gain.
We hate ranges. The average consumer has got to hate a range.
They
freaking
do.
range. I don't want a damn range.
Why
just tell me what it's going to cost.
Carvana doesn't advertise inventory on their site. All they have is, it's like Google, price trade. Mm-hmm. And then to get the number, you get dumped into the SRP page.
That's right.
And that's the law of reciprocity. Right. If they were fair with me on the trade value, I don't even need to shop them, because I'm sure they're fair with me on all these prices, and which they're not. You got it. Price.
Yep. You got it. Unbelievable. Well, hopefully we get to that point. Hopefully with you coming on board with Accu-Trade, more dealerships, I think will, obviously they're going to be forced to wake up. But hopefully just organically more dealerships wake up. There's a lot of competition out there. It seems like everyone's struggling to get their trade appraisal tool out there. But from my experience, the Accu-Trade seems like the one that's going to take the foothold and hopefully drown out some of the other ones out there. And any dealership out there that's shying away from this, they're cutting their own throat really bad. And they're going to feel the ramifications here in the next maybe 2 to 3 years.
No, it's the key to digital retail. There's a limitless amount of oil. I didn't truly understand how much potential there was for it until we finally figured it out. And then once it took off, we had about, 8 months of it, and broke 6 all-time records along the way, and just boom, boom, boom. And then all of a sudden inventory shortage.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's
fun times, man.
It is. It's the most disruptive time in history of retail.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, well, I liked your quote. It was our industry is at a crossroads. Actually, our industry at crossroads during a very unique time of innovation, probably the most amount of disruption in the history of automotive retail. And Cars.com is uniquely equipped to help dealers navigate the world of online retailing and used vehicle acquisition. So, yeah, they had to love that quote. That's great.
It's the truth. And this is going to unlock every digital retail tool. So it's not a lead generator. It's transactional.
Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing pissed me off more was when, someone would come in pitching the digital retail solution, you plug it in and if, 2 months later, they're checking back with you. And you're like, well, I haven't really sold anything. Yeah, but you're getting more leads. The quality of leads are so much better. I'm like,
yeah, but I just replaced my e-price button with your button. I got the same number of leads. It's just the button says,
but they're super
else.
Leads.
Yeah,
super leads. It's like, get that shit out.
So that's where we're going to bridge the gap, is by helping everybody in how to execute the tool. Because you're right, it is more than that.
For sure. Well, again, congratulations on the move. I hope everything continues to go smooth for you. I know whenever I went from the dealer world over to the vendor world, it was a shock to the system. But you mentioned it earlier when we first got started. It's that translation, being able to translate the dealer verbiage and thought process over to the vendor and vice versa. Because when I would walk into a dealership and they knew who I was, they knew the years of experience I had, especially when I was at mile one, they knew that I was a dealer guy, even though I was on the vendor side. Or at that point I was working for mile one, but I was coming from corporate. So I was almost basically a vendor, because I was coming in to sell for the mothership. But, just the level of respect that you would get because they knew that you were actually on the dealership level. You spoke the language. It made all the world in the difference. Yeah, that's awesome.
It's not an easy transition.
No, it's not. No. It's not easy, but it's appreciated. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, Brian, we're glad to see you on this side. We need more Rosetta Stones. And I hope we can host you again on Refresh Friday.
No, I appreciate it.
Yeah, it'd be great to see you in like 6 to 8 months, have you back on and pick your brain a little bit more and see what new stuff you've got to talk about. That'll be great.
Absolutely. I'm sure there'll be some interesting stories.
There better
no
be.
doubt.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Have a good weekend.
You got it, Brian. Take care.